My role is first as a U.S. youth delegate with SustainUS, and I'm leading our intergenerational equity campaign. And within that, I'm also working with the official youth constituency to the UNFCCC as their economic advisor as we push for intergenerational equity in the text and then to operationalize it as well.
And what do you make of what's been going on so far? I mean, talk first, before we get into the big picture, talk first about intergenerational equity. What does that mean to you?
Well, to me, it means we need to really place equivalent value on the lives of people in the future, which presently is not the case in economic practice. But if you ask most people, they'll say they care about the world that we leave to our children, our grandchildren, our future descendants. And I don't think people realize that that doesn't translate into what economists are actually doing. So to me, it's getting equivalent value for their future, because it doesn't really seem proper that we would value the present for ourselves at 100% and then value their future, which to them will be the present that they experience, at a lesser value.
How does that actually translate into policy? Because I suppose development that we've seen over the past 100 years has had negative impacts on the environment in terms of, I guess, air pollution, water pollution, but it's also been tremendously beneficial for the human race in terms of our quality of life and how we go about, and I guess our ease to travel the world and enjoy ourselves in whatever way we see fit. So how does this concept of equity actually translate itself into real economic policy?
Well, we've certainly enjoyed many benefits of development. To put that equity into practice would be through sustainable development, which in its simplest, widest definition is development that meets the needs of people today without infringing upon the ability of people in the future to meet their own needs. And that's where you actually have to figure out economically how you do that. And what I would say is a critical component of that answer in policy is addressing what economists call discounting, or the rate at which they will discount the future, as I was just alluding to, about placing a lesser value on what's happening, costs and benefits in the future. Mm-hmm. Because discounting, in my view, would be fundamentally incompatible with sustainability, because sustainability is looking at the long trend. How are things going to be in the future? Is the system still going to function as well as it does today? Mm-hmm. But if you're not fully accounting for the future costs and benefits, you're focusing in a very biased way on the present. And this is actually done through economic modeling, and those evaluations then influence the level of ambition that we take in climate policy. So you can follow the threads from intergenerational equity as a principle, a moral value, through into the economic evaluations we make about climate change, and then all the way down into policy at both the national and international levels.
How far ahead should governments, do you feel, be planning in terms of integrating this concept of intergenerational equity into their plans? Are we talking one generation, 2, 3? Do you have any sort of specific, do people who've thought about this have any specific timelines?
Well, it's a tricky answer to that question, because if we value democracy, then our policymakers should be valuing as far into the future as the majority wishes them to be, which at present is usually a single election cycle at most. But the challenge then is, how far into the future should people want them to be valuing? And if you look to a lot of the wealth of indigenous cultures, they'll, for example, say that 7 generations was their rule for how far you should look into the future when you're making a decision today. And in fact, we've been reaching out to the indigenous peoples constituency here at the UNFCCC to see if we can help bring that wealth of knowledge into what we're doing with intergenerational equity. But at least 7 generations, but considering that climate change can fundamentally and forever irreversibly change the climate of this planet, I think we need to look at the biggest picture very far into the future. And there are a number of technical ways that you can do that, whether it's discounting not at all, or not discounting for, say, the first 7 generations and then discounting thereafter.
I guess a final point, the NGOs a lot of the NGOs, mostly the environmental NGOs, walked out of this conference yesterday saying that they felt that it was not going to achieve anything. I don't think many of them felt that they were necessarily truly involved in this process anymore. From a youth perspective, does anyone listen to you? I mean, do you find yourself sort of talking and people nodding, at least politicians nodding, but not actually taking on board what you're saying? I know you can't talk for all youth, but give us a perspective from this conference.
Certainly. I personally know many who walked out yesterday, and I feel their frustration. But personally, I've been seeing results, and the team I'm working with. In fact, as you're interviewing me here now in the ADP meeting, my colleagues are working with the negotiators from countries. They were very receptive to the text that we wanted to see proposed, language around future generations and intergenerational equity, and many countries on the floor right now are fighting for us and being our champions. And in that sense, it is empowering that if you play the inside game to the full potential, there's still no guarantee that the final outcome document will reflect what we want, but they've genuinely listened to us. For example, the entire Africa group yesterday signed our declaration on intergenerational equity. So you can definitely have a big impact, but you need to also balance between the inside and outside strategy. Both are important.